imagine internet platforms like Google Search, Twitter and Google Translate being used to unravel the mystery behind the origins of SARS-CoV-2? A crack team of data scientists, mathematicians, engineers and biologists did exactly that to amass evidence that has now compelled the world to sit up and take notice of the hypothesis that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, may have emerged from a lab in China. The team calls itself Drastic. It is an informal amalgam of experts and researchers from across the world who painstakingly pieced together various strands of data and information and found that lab origin of the virus is a plausible hypothesis. In this episode of BioQuest, we will tell you why the discoveries made by Drastic are significant in unraveling the mystery behind the origins of SARS-CoV-2. More than 20 researchers and scientists have come together from across the world under the name Drastic, an acronym for Decentralized Radical Autonomous Search Team investigating COVID-19. Many of its team members had been researching the origins of COVID-19 independently before they joined the group. Then they started working with each other informally before its coordinator Billy Bostickson named the team Drastic on 21st May 2021. After joining Drastic, they worked as a team, sharpening each other's insights and connecting the dots to demystify the origins of COVID-19. This website hosts the research work of these Twitter detectives on the origins of COVID-19. But these researchers are not the only contributors of Drastic. Many of its members prefer to operate anonymously. Some of the Drastic team members, like India-based scientist couple Dr. Monali Rahalkar and Dr. Rahul Bahulikar, have been vocal about their findings. In this article, published on 13th June 2021 in an India-based news magazine, The Week, the scientist duo from Pune described their discoveries that can help in clearing the haze around the origins of the virus. They write that as a scientific couple, they were intrigued by the virus and started an online expedition at the end of March 2020. The journey led them to discover the link between a copper mine in China and the nearest relative of SARS-CoV-2.
I, with Rahul, my husband, we started this investigation or searching for COVID-19 origins last year. We came across several papers, and two of them actually said that the COVID-19 was, having a zoonotic origin. These papers were published in Lancet and Nature Medicine, but we were not completely convinced by these papers. Reading some more papers, we found that there was a very interesting one published from North Carolina University, which talked about chimeric coronaviruses. So we thought that, such things can also happen. And this paper was written by Vineet Menachari, the first author, and you will be very interested to know that Shi Zhengli, the Bat Woman or the Center for Emerging Diseases head, had also co-authored this paper.
The scientist couple further write about China's foremost coronavirus research institute, housing one of the world's largest collections of bat samples and bat virus strains, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and its lead researcher Shi Zhengli, who was among the first to identify horseshoe bats as natural reservoirs for SARS-CoV, the virus that sparked an outbreak in 2002. They refer to this article in US-based magazine Scientific American, published on 11th March 2020, carrying statements by Shi Zhengli. Referring to a 2012 incident, the article reads, Shi's team had been called in to investigate the virus profile of a mine shaft in Yunnan's mountainous Mojiang County, where 6 miners suffered from pneumonia-like diseases and 2 died. After sampling the cave for 1 year, the researchers discovered a diverse group of coronaviruses in 6 bat species. In many cases, multiple viral strains had infected a single animal, turning it into a flying factory for new viruses. The article further said the genomic sequence of the virus, eventually named SARS-CoV-2, was 96% identical to that of a coronavirus the researchers had identified in horseshoe bats in Yunnan. Significantly, the article did not specify the name of the 2012 virus. The Indian scientific couple refer to another article published in Nature on 3rd February 2020 and co-authored by Shi Zhengli, which mentions that rat G13 found in Yunnan province was 96.2% similar and the closest relative of SARS-CoV-2. But this is what Shi Zhengli did not disclose to readers of Scientific American and Nature.
Shi Zhengli, the bat woman, did not reveal that this RATG13 had an older name, and this older name was BT-CoV4991. We found this in a preprint by Dr. Dean Bengtson, and it was available on the internet in April 2021. This was the second clue which we found. In Scientific American, Shi Zhengli was also talking about this Mojang mine shaft, which where there was an incident where 2 of the 6 miners had died in a pneumonia-like illness, but she had not revealed that she got the RATG13 from this mine. Now, to confirm that this particular mine was the same, we were searching for again, and on there was a paper in the very famous journal Science which confirmed that they had also written about this incident, and this confirmed that this was the same mine, the mine shaft in Mojang, where 3 miners had died due to a pneumonia-like illness, and the mine was the same where RATG13 sample was picked up by Shi Zhengli.
Coincidentally, at least 3 other researchers reached the same conclusions independently around the same time. US-based scientist and entrepreneur Luigi Varon, Auckland-based engineer and data scientist Gilles Demonov, and Russian-Canadian biotech entrepreneur Yuri Degin, all of whom were among the founding members of Drastic later. In this article, published in an American online publishing platform Medium on 22nd April 2020, Yuri pointed out that though she knew about rat G13, she only disclosed it in January 2020.
When I wrote the Medium article in April, I was already kind of suspicious at whether the RATG sample was collected from the same spot as this 4991 fragment. They were both listed as coming from Yunnan. 4991 was more detailed, coming from the Mojang mine, and RATG13 was very broadly described as coming from the Pu'er City autonomous region. And so that raised suspicion because, the genomic fragment matched 100%. And this was also noticed by my co-author, Rossana Segreta, independently, even back in March. And so we put kind of the 2 and 2 together, and we realized that, 100% match for the fragment and all of the details of collection being very similar most likely means that, RATG13 comes from, it's basically the full genome of the 4991 fragment that was published in 2016.
An enigmatic person from Eastern India who calls himself Seeker and prefers to stay anonymous helped both Monali and Yuri connect the dots between rat G13 or RA4991 found in Mojang mine in China's Yunnan and SARS-CoV-2.
The Seeker's email said that actually he had found a master's thesis published from China, and he also sent us a link to the master thesis. This thesis talked about the pneumonia cases which had happened to this particular miners in the Mojang mine shaft. So it was a very detailed account of the illness, what happened to the miners which had gone to clean up the mine. Now, what happened to these people? So these people started experiencing fever, cough, and later on that cough turned into pneumonia. China or Chinese doctors could have thought that this could be related to SARS, and therefore they consulted Dr. Zhong Nanshan. Now, Dr. Zhong Nanshan is known as the SARS doctor of China, and he has also provided very important inputs in COVID-19. So Zhong Nanshan remotely consulted these cases, and he described this particular patient's pneumonia to be of the viral origin. So the miners' pneumonia resembled COVID-19 in all different senses, and in our paper we have clearly compared that. In contrast to that, Shi Zhengli mentioned in her interview with Scientific American that the miners had contracted a fungal disease, and this was there were no reasons given by her, and so this case becomes even more suspicious.
In this article in Medium, Gilles Demenov points to conclusions in a master thesis under the guidance of SARS expert Dr. Zhong Nan Shan. Dr. Zhong was consulted by the Kunming Hospital after the second miner died and had got the 2 remaining patients and the 2 recovered ones to be tested again for SARS antibodies. The Wuhan Institute of Virology handled these tests, which all turned out positive. While the master thesis concludes that the unknown virus that led to severe pneumonia could be the SARS-like coronavirus from the Chinese Rufus horseshoe bat or another bat's SARS-like coronavirus, it also juxtaposes this conflicting opinion of Shi Zhengli. Gilles writes that it's odd that a 2016 PhD thesis under the guidance of Gao Fu, China's CDC head, concluded that the cause of the 2012 outbreak was not yet clear, totally ignoring the opinion and diagnosis of Dr. Zhong Nan Shan, also ignoring the 4 SARS antibodies tests done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology that all turned out positive. Besides ignoring the fact that the WIV did indeed follow the lead of Dr. Zhong Nan Shan and went sampling bats in that very cave in 2013.
When our drastic member, the seeker, found the thesis, the master's thesis from the Mojiang mine, it essentially confirmed that yes, the 4991 is the same as RETG13 because it was collected after the miners got SARS-like pneumonia, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology was actually invited to investigate both the miners and then the cave later, where they sampled several viruses from the bats. So that confirmed our suspicions, and eventually the Wuhan Institute of Virology was, forced to admit that yes, this is the same virus, same sample, which for some reason they renamed from originally 4991 to RETG13. And that was a very suspicious thing to do because they never mentioned in their paper how they came across RETG13. In the 2020 paper, they just, very short sentence mentioning that, oh, we matched, a small fragment, but they didn't say what kind of fragment it was. And then they made a hint that they sequenced RETG13 fully only after they noticed the fragment, which is very odd because also we discovered later that they sequenced RETG13 in 2018. Basically, when they uploaded the sequencing data to GenBank, we noticed that it said year of sequencing 2017 and 2018. One of our drastic members, Francisco de Assis, noticed this. And then also we confronted the Wuhan Institute of Virology asking when exactly they sequenced RETG13 genome, and they were forced to again admit that they actually sequenced it much earlier. They sequenced it in 2018.
Some drastic people were able to actually show that effectively RETG13 was nothing else that another virus or the same virus under a different name, which was 4991. And that 4991 was the name of the virus in the description of the accident of the miners in Mojiang. So when drastic people found the story of the Mojiang mine, they found about 4991. And it took a lot of time to at least be able to say, well, actually 4991 from the Mojiang mine is the RETG13 that Shi Zhengli is talking about. So people are suspecting that the change of name may be a way to try to actually hide the link to the mine. It's not very clear, but some people find it quite suspect.
The scientific couple from Pune and Yuri Degin then independently drew an important link between Batwoman Shi Zhengli's controversial research work in the Wuhan Institute of Virology and a possible lab origin of SARS-CoV-2.
Though WIV or Wuhan Institute of Virology has denied this fact that they had a SARS coronavirus too before the pandemic, it is an intriguing fact that they had this RETG13 from the beginning. Now, they were doing various experiments which created chimeric viruses. RETG13 is 96.2% related to SARS-CoV-2. So there is a possibility that this particular virus, RETG13, was either modified or a synthetic virus like SARS coronavirus 2 was synthesized using the backbone of RETG13.
And we know that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was working on a pan-coronavirus therapeutic. They were working on this peptide that is supposed to block the fusion of the spike receptor with the cell membrane and prevent the virus from entering the cell. This was published by Shi Jianli and others early in 2020. And also Ralph Baric was working on remdesivir and other therapeutics to essentially prevent the virus from replicating or create enough mutations to stop the virus from replicating efficiently. At the same time, we know that EcoHealth had the idea of creating a SARS vaccine, and Peter Daszak actually spoke about this in an interview back in November 2019, when he said that why just create a SARS vaccine if you can take various spike genes and splice them into reverse genetic systems and create a better vaccine, a more broad vaccine against, other types of coronaviruses. So pan-coronavirus vaccine is something that was definitely on top of their mind, and this is very highly likely that Wuhan Institute of Virology is working on something like this. Another aspect is that they could have been working not just on the human vaccine to protect humans, but also on this idea of animal vaccines or even self-replicating vaccines or self-transmitting vaccines, that basically you infect some bats with this vaccine, and bats, it's a virus, the bats will transmit it from one bat to another and prevent the bats from catching those human dangerous viruses in the future. Basically, these vaccines their goal is to give the antibodies to these bats so that the viruses that pose dangers to humans will not infect those bats, and it ultimately won't transfer to humans. So if this was something that the Wuhan Institute of Virology could have been working on, this would explain very well the furin cleavage site that could have been inserted to expand the species tropism of such a vaccine, and just the way that we see this potentially being passaged in humanized mice in a lab could also explain that this was part of the vaccine development.
The Mojiang mine in South China's Yunnan province is now inaccessible. Reporters from many media organizations tried to access it but could not reach the area because of roadblocks and secret police. If there is nothing to hide, why close the mine to reporters and scientists? Do the Chinese authorities not want them to look into the possibility of whether its scientists were carrying out risky experiments on any of the coronaviruses collected from the Mojiang mine? Is there a link between rat G13 virus found in the mine and SARS-CoV-2, which China is trying to hide? In fact, China has a history of lab leaks. Drastic member Gilles Demonov exposes China's lab leaks in the next report. This article by Gilles Demonov, published in Medium on 16th November 2020, lays bare the disturbing history of SARS lab leaks. Quoting a professor in the Department of Medicine at Peking University who has repeatedly entered the China Center for Disease Control, Gilles writes about a February 2004 incident of leak of SARS virus from the Virus Morphology and Viral Diarrhea Laboratory at the CDC Institute of Virology in Beijing. Gilles writes, the SARS strain was originally required to be stored in a special safe in the laboratory and locked. But at some stage, the SARS strain was placed outside in the corridor because the overcrowding of laboratory personnel was very serious, as the number of laboratory staff at that time was 3 times the reasonable load of the laboratory, and because the room was too crowded, the refrigerator containing the SARS virus was moved into the aisle. Ren Xiaoli, a doctoral student, regularly took out the kit containing the normally attenuated SARS virus from the fridge and directly walked into the ordinary electron microscope room next door. In a few days, Ren and Kui, another virus morphology student in the viral diarrhea department, developed symptoms such as diarrhea and high fever and were found to be positive with SARS antibodies. Gilles further reproduces text from one of the first notices issued by the World Health Organization in response to the lab leak incident.
This accident back in 2004 actually was at a very top lab in China at the time, the Institute of Virology. And it's a very serious accident that happened there. 1,000 people were put in isolation, 11 people got infected, 1 person died. And the reason for this was very gross and basic errors being made. such as badly deactivated, inactivated virus, and not being very careful and having overcrowding of the laboratory. At the same time, and to make it worse, there was a bit of a cover-up. So the first two cases were covered up. We only know about it because of investigative journalists. And also, something very important is that the WHO, which was sent there to basically do an investigation, went missing in action. So for some reason, the Chinese made sure that the WHO left the scene very quickly. And there was no report published with the WHO, only part of the Chinese report was published, so we don't really know very precisely what happened. And there were supposedly some sanctions, but actually nobody got really sanctioned. They basically covered it up and went on doing the same thing again, basically without really punishing the people responsible.
In another article published in Medium on 27 September 2020, Gilles reveals how Chinese authorities had themselves admitted that basic safety protocols were not being scrupulously followed in Chinese labs. It quotes Yang Zhangqi, a deputy director of the Pathogen Biology Department at Wuhan University, as saying that some researchers discharged laboratory materials into the sewer after experiments without a specific biological disposal mechanism. It also quotes Yuang Ziming, the director of the Wuhan Institute of Virology and a top Chinese Communist Party representative, as admitting that due to the limited resources, some BSL-3 laboratories run on extremely minimal operational costs, or in some cases, none at all. Gilles quotes from an article published in February 2015 in the China Daily, an English-language newspaper owned by the CCP and often used as a guide to Chinese government policy. In an acknowledgement of poor supervision and monitoring of research on dangerous and exotic pathogens in Chinese labs, the article says, "We cannot afford another accidental leakage of pathogens like the one in 2004.
If we look at some evaluations from some Chinese specialists themselves, back in even November 2019 or February 2020, they're still highlighting very essential problems in some P3s and P2s. Some of these labs, for example, as they say, don't even have a proper maintenance budget. I'm not saying that all of them are like this, but there's still too many without proper training and without proper maintenance budget. So it still is a problem.
Together with Drastic coordinator Billy Bostixon and an anonymous contributor, Gilles Stemanov also investigated the case of the now missing databases of 22,000 coronavirus samples from the website of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In a development that raises suspicions on the true intentions of the institute, on 12 September 2019, the main database of samples and viral sequences of the institute went offline. Eventually, every single of the 16 virus databases managed by the Wuhan Institute was taken offline. Billy, Gilles and the anonymous contributor reviewed the circumstances in which this happened and explained that these databases, now missing from public domain, may provide essential clues on the origins of SARS-CoV-2. In this investigation, Billy Bostixon, Gilles Stemanov and an anonymous contributor find out that on 12 September 2019, the database seems to have been taken offline for non-WIV access, and so there is no access anymore, and the database has not been put back online for external access since then. In a response to Tommy Clearly, who identifies himself as a philosopher in his Twitter bio, Shi Zhengli explained that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Wuhan Institute of Virology's web server was fiercely attacked, and hence the institute decided to close down some web pages and databases, including the bat virus database. She also claimed to have no idea on when the database will be put online again.
Now, the funny story about that database is that when Shi Zhengli basically was asked why the database went offline, she basically said that it was taken offline during the outbreak because some hackers were trying to get into it. Now, the problem is that it was actually, we were able to prove that it was taken offline 3 months before the outbreak. So what she said made no sense whatsoever. The other thing which is very important is that the database is actually a key piece of information. If we could have looked there have a look at the viruses there, which have never been published, so the ones that are in the private section, it would be very interesting because we would be maybe able to really understand whether there's very close related to SARS-CoV-2 there. Now, this has been going on for nearly 2 years now. The database is not available. There's no reason or credible reason given for why it's not available. It's just a matter of fact, it's gone, and they don't want to put it back online.
This leads to the question, how could the database have been pulled offline because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Because the COVID-19 outbreak started in December 2019 and was declared a pandemic months later, whereas the database was pulled offline in September 2019. So how could the two be connected? Gilles Stemanov also explains how the WHO probe into the origins of the virus was heavily controlled by China from as early as when the terms of references for the China part of the probe were framed. These terms of references outlined the scope of studies and set out the main guiding principles. As per the terms of references, the final composition of the international team should be agreed by both China and WHO. So, WHO suggested names of team members and China handpicked those it liked among them. On ways of working, the terms of references mention that the international team will undertake a visit to China at an appropriate time. And as some of the work may already be partially done or documented by the time the international team initiates its work, the study will therefore build on existing information and augment rather than duplicate ongoing or existing efforts. This, in other words, means that if China has already done the work, WHO must accept it.
The important thing is that these terms of references were negotiated around July-August 2020 by Peter Mbarek, who actually went to China, and he went with someone else, which I think we know who that person is, but they never actually told us who the second person was. And they secretly negotiated these terms, these very unsatisfactory terms. They was negotiated behind closed door. And worse than that, they were not actually published for quite a long time. They were finished around August, at the end of the trip, in August 2020, and they didn't publish them for something like 3 months. So not only it was done under closed door, but they didn't even actually publish what they had done until very late. So it's not exactly the kind of process that you want for something as important as a China WHO joint study mission. So at the end of the day, the reality again is that you shouldn't expect too much from China at all on the lab side, and you're much better to try to do the work cooperatively from abroad with all the information services that you can get, including intelligence. And if people really decide to work together, nations working together with intelligence services, I'm fairly confident that we should be able to at least be able to see whether this is a valid hypothesis and whether it can be confirmed or not.
The DRASTIC team made other key breakthroughs too that further help in demystifying the origins of SARS-CoV-2. For instance, its coordinator Billy Bostickson collated over 260 science-based questions on the origins of the virus, most of which have not been answered by experts to date. Francisco Diaz tracked all WIV and other Chinese bat sampling expeditions. Dan and Carl Sirotkin published the first peer-reviewed paper suggesting gain-of-function techniques were used at WIV, focusing on the possible role of serial passage in a lab leak of SARS-CoV-2. Dayu Zhang, Dan and Amp, Carl Sirotkin, Yuri Degin, Rosanna Sogretto, Dr. Rahul Bahulikar, Dr. Monali Rahalkar, Gilles Stemanov, Rodolphe de Maistre, Billy Bostickson and Annan published many papers which have been widely read and have helped raise awareness on the likelihood of a laboratory leak from a Wuhan lab. Their work makes for a strong case for a fair, independent and in-depth probe into the lab leak theory. Thanks for watching.